There we go. Recording is in progress. So I thought I might actually start the meeting. It might be interesting if a couple of people felt like commenting briefly on some of the climate change that they've noticed, how it's affected their gardening. We're not going to talk about climate change affecting the planet, the broad issues necessarily, but how it's affected your gardening, if it's changed practices, if it's led to increased challenges in any way. Just sort of like, you got the reaction button if anybody wants to put up their hand, if anybody wants to share that. I know we had an extended autumn, we had was it October that was incredibly hot, and I have the best preserved onions I've ever had in my life, so happiness there. But for 2 years I've been watering my garden, which I never ever did before. So watering my garden in the spring, especially the seedlings, helping them establish their roots. I see some people nodding and going, yeah, me too. I noticed Teresa Sullivan isn't here, too bad, because this was her idea, but she's a teacher and very, very busy and got young kids too. So no shows of hands, nobody wants to leap in and say, yeah, I've been affected this way. Pas de commentaires à propos des changements climatiques que vous avez aperçus dans votre jardin. Oh, we've got 2 participants raising hands. So we'll start with Andrew, then Sandy, and then Gwyn. Andrew.
Hi, so I've been doing growing plants, food plants and vegetables for the past 6 years in Quebec intensively. And I've noticed there's been a lot of erratic kind of weather, big droughts, even in the springtime, like when you should have a lot of rain. Have you guys noticed? So the past 3 years, we've had 2 years where there was a drought in the spring, as well as drought in the fall sometimes. Weird intense heat waves, and also cold in August. That was strange too. Like when it goes down to 13-14 degrees in early August. I mean, that seems a little anomalous.
So the erratic climate patterns, yeah, I think we've all noticed that. I noticed a lot of people shaking their hands. Thanks, Andrew. Good point. Sandy.
Yeah, I'm not a big operation, but we enjoy our huge vegetable garden and a lot of flower beds. And we've been doing this for basically 40 years. And what I notice is the perennial beds where you kind of developed each month's colors and things. I find, especially the last few years, it seems like they overlap closer, like things that should be only blooming in say early July are now sneaking to even early June, and like your sequence is totally different because some mature very fast if it's extra warm, so they kind of creep up on others, and I find it more challenging, shall we say, for the flower gardens to have things that come one after the other rather than all at once and then nothing. I don't know how many of you now find that by the end of August, your flower beds, before maybe it was a blessing that we'd have an early frost and it would kill those moth-eaten looking some of the flowers. But what happened now is I find that by September, and now we have nice weather through September and almost into October, before we have a heavy frost, there's almost nothing left there. It's kind of desolate. So I'm thinking that with climate change, we're going to have to evolve species that can come in, I guess, late September now to keep us in color. Anyway, that's my biggest observation. That's the timing.
That's a really great point. It's sort of an all or nothing phenomenon, and this this erratic quality.
Yeah, very, very odd. Yeah.
Thank you so much. One last comment then. I don't see any other hands up. So just Gwyn, please, and then we'll have a chat with let Jen do her presentation.
Hi, everybody. I would just say that I knew I was going to be traveling last year, so I planted things that I knew would be drought resistant, and I just let them get on with it. And it was pretty good, actually. The squash turned out to be fairly prolific. It's true that I noticed the stems were shorter because they didn't have so much water, I guess. I mulched things as well. So yeah, I like to go with the seasons, but I think we can let the garden get on with it to some extent. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Anyway,
That-
I'll shut up.
No, that's a great thing. There is sort of a different way of a different rhythm to things, but nature does adapt remarkably in many ways. So that's a really good point. Thank you. Okay, everybody. So I'm going to pass it over to Jen. I'd asked everybody if you could turn off your camera just to lower the bandwidth for now. And as soon as Jen's presentation is over, then we'll pop the cameras back on to have a nice chat. So thank you all so much, and I'll pass it over to you, Jen.
Now, the only issue I have, oh, good. Okay, I'm fine. I usually do Microsoft Teams, so I'm not used to Zoom that much, but I'm okay. I think I got share screen, so I should be okay. I hope. And I've got so many things on my screen. There we go. So let me know if you guys see this.
Yes, we see it. Thanks.
Perfect. So I find it really neat to talk to, just hearing your comments. I could tell that you guys are serious about gardening. And so it's a pleasure for me to be speaking with you, other passionate people that love growing in nature and worried about what's happening. And we can see the changes happening. And you know, a few of you made comments already, like how, you know, basically we're getting a lot of erratic weather. And that is, a lot of people think that warming means that we're just going to have a warmer climate all across the world, but we're going to be having really intense different changes in the weather, erratic weather, which we're finding already with this, you know. And if you guys want to comment or whatever, like, let me know. And what was I going to say? Also, our plant hardiness zone is not as secure as it used to be. So it used to be, like one of you were mentioning about how the flowers are kind of overlapping the blooming and the change that we're having. So true. And it's really to do with our erratic weather, having, like somebody mentioned, warm, a cold August, but then a really warm October. That's not what we normally have. So I'm going to try not to be too long. I told Julie to make sure that I don't go too long with the climate change part and I go into the practical part. Because I have a tendency to like to talk. I have PowerPoints here that I'm going to give to Julie if you guys would like. And they have different, there's some videos or different websites that you guys might want to have. So feel free to use them if you want. So I'm going to be showing you different things, but I'm not going to play the videos because it's with my internet, it's really bad, really slow. And so we're not going to get much from it. But anyway, just to say that climate change is obviously changing our climate. NASA has a whole bunch of videos that they've updated it recently with the warming trends on the Earth. They started around the 1880s, the 1800s, the later 1800s with recording the global temperatures. And so they don't really obviously have records before that unless you do core, ice core temperatures or anything like that. But it's really interesting to note that it's just speeding forward the rising levels of climate change. And obviously that's impacting our Arctic areas, so the ice is melting. So they're feeling it a lot more than we are. We're feeling it, but they, in the northern regions, they're, I'm sure you've heard on the news, are really suffering for that. They're about 4 to 5 degrees higher temperatures than we are. So they're getting really impacted. And the ice is melting really fast and it's affecting their travel. I'm sure you've all heard that too, so I won't go too much. And, well, first of all, my husband has been studying climate change for, since the 80s. And he's just, when we got married already, he sped me along and got me involved in what was happening in the environment. But I still, unfortunately, have close people to me that don't believe it's truly happening, which is really sad. But we are seeing the effects now on the news with the intense heat waves, the devastating fires, the droughts, stronger hurricanes, floods, especially the coastal regions are really impacted. Tornadoes, ice melt, like I mentioned before. And unfortunately, that impacts our food prices, and that really affects it's the poverty, people that have less money that are impacted, but also the working poor really are impacted. And even recently, well, today, I think it was today or yesterday, I don't know if anybody heard about that, but we've got the milk prices have raised. Now, I have close friends that are dairy farmers that they're impacted too. So it's just everybody's getting impacted, really. We have to remember that as we hear about climate change. So why should we care? What's wrong with our agricultural system? Well, just to backtrack, I'm only going to focus on the agriculture aspect of climate change. I'm not going to, that's more my forte. I'm not going to focus on the other parts, but they're realizing that agriculture has a huge impact on our global climate. It not only rises greenhouse gases, but it's also impacting, because of these negative agricultural practices, it's contaminating our food. Even, you hear about E. coli, salmonella in foods that you wouldn't expect that to be, like in spinach. And the industrial agriculture has really had an impact on the way we see food, such as monoculture. So I teach a lot about permaculture, and we have a permaculture principle that talks about obtain a yield. And what that means is not a yield like in a whole land of corn, but rather having the diverse yield. So if you have a plant that can give you 3 different yields, if it's feeding the soil nitrogen, you're able to obtain leaves from it and eat it. And let's say beans, for example, you can have fresh beans, dry beans, seeds. You can have nitrogen that's fed into the soil. You can eat the leaves. Many people don't realize that. So you have many aspects to that. And if you have many plants within that system, a more biodiverse system, it becomes more resilient. So with monoculture, the problem with that, the way our climate is going, if you get a disaster in a cornfield, that whole yield is gone. Whereas if you have a farm that has many diverse systems, if one gets taken out, you still have the strength of the other ones holding on. And anyway, so it's kind of against what we see in nature, what usually happens. Also, it adds pesticides, which everybody knows, to our food. I'm going to diminish the camera so I can, there we go. With that, we know it increases pest resistance. So if we're using pesticides, eventually the pests end up being resistant to those pesticides, which therein lies the problem. And the same with herbicides. It becomes, the weeds end up being able to resist that herbicide. So we get these mega pest problems and mega weed problems. Now I'm a person, because of permaculture, I don't necessarily consider all weeds a problem, but it is a problem if you've got a working farm that you need to get your crops out. But we really, want to take care of our soils and how we grow our food, because it ends up, if we add these pesticides and herbicides, it decreases beneficial insects and also the biological soil activity. And this is a huge component to agriculture that people are researching and finding more and more that we need. that we can't just keep adding, you know, the NPK typical fertilizers to the soil. There's so much rich biological activity that we're losing and benefits to that if we only focus on the main nutrients that the plants need. What happens too with agriculture, with these issues that are happening, and also deforestation, I'll be mentioning that later, is it really degrades the soil. And so you get really dry. Well, you were talking about it actually, some of you already, about how our summers get really dry. But one thing that wasn't really mentioned was how we get torrential rains when it does rain. So we don't even have normal rain anymore. We go for a while without rain, and when it does come, it's really heavy. So I don't know about you guys, but I remember when I was a kid, I used to love rainy days, that I'd get a good book and I enjoyed it. It was just that kind of gentle rain that would go for 2 or 3 days. And we don't really have that anymore. We seem to have like more torrential type rains. And what happens is when that soil is dried out and we get that heavy rain, it has nowhere to go. So it doesn't, the soil can't absorb it quickly. It ends up causing flooding, runoffs, and issues like that. So I'm not sure if any of you have heard of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s in the States, where there was anyway, there's a video here for you to watch. It's basically they overworked the land, but there was other aspects that tied into that as well. They weren't working with the land, they were working against it. That's another permaculture thing. You're going to hear me talk a lot of little permaculture quotes, like working with nature rather than against nature. And we really need to start focusing on how that looks in small gardens, but larger growing as well. I'm not going to go too far in this, just some added information, just that the World Wildlife Organization says that half of the topsoil on the planet has been lost in the last 150 years. In addition to erosion, soil quality is affected by other aspects of agriculture. These impacts include compaction, which I'll talk about later, loss of soil structure, nutrient degradation, and soil salinity. They are very real and at times severe issues. So this is a real issue that the world is realizing is important. Another negative impact that we've had with these agricultural systems in the past is less diversity in our food. So I have a chart here. I'm not going to go on about it too long, but we've got a lot less varieties of food. Now, I really worry about that, particularly when you start looking at the nutrient levels of each food crop, because one cucumber is not the same as another. You have different nutrient levels to them. So we're not only losing that, but also the stability or the resilience that we can have in the future. So I'll be talking a little bit about seed saving. That's my ultimate passion. I hope to be talking, well, I've scheduled to talk to you guys about that in 2 or 3 weeks or something. And that's a really interesting thing. I'm sure some of you guys have done some of that before too. Just even with peas, for example, you have all kinds of different diseases that affect each one differently. So yeah, just that we're losing diversity in our food. We got to keep those diverse vegetables and fruits and you know, just plants in general. Like even in the woods, there's many plants like American ginseng and golden seal that have been over foraged. So people need to be educated even in the foraging, how much to take and how much to leave behind, and replant our native species to get that diversity going again. So I'm just going to look at my watch because I don't want to talk too long about this.
Hi,
Just that,
Jen. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm
so-
just gonna, I didn't hear to say, I
No.
was gonna let you know when you've reached the halfway point of your time.
yeah, see,
Okay.
I knew I would do it. Okay.
Okay, but you
So
haven't
I'll go really
reached it yet,
fast.
but I'll let you know when you have.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Julie. So, so I'm going to try to peel apart the important parts. Just and you guys can look at these slides after. Just that our diversity in general, because it's disappearing, is impacting our climate even more. So let's say mangroves on the coastal regions, they're disappearing, declining, and they can actually sequester 2 to 4 times greater carbon amounts than tropical forests. So and they also really help with storm surges. They can help buffer that and help help the land not erode so quickly. So I'm just going to go over this a bit. So I told you about nutrients in our food decreasing. You can look at this later, including in our meat as well. And the poorer we treat our animals, the poorer the food is as well. So you can look at that later. Here's some of our pigs and our hens. They're pretty happy. They like to forage. So I'm just skipping over this to get to the point. So deforestation is a real big problem with globally dealing with our soil conditions. And so basically it's just robbing the soil as well. And farmers are growing monocrops, but we're losing all of that, those great forests that have a great amount of diversity, both in the insect life, the plant life, the soil life, everything. So when you look at this monocrop, it's actually really dead in many, many ways. And soil degradation is a global issue. You might want to look into the Yellow River in China. There's many polluted waterways everywhere, not just India. But an interesting one you're probably aware of, but it's really interesting to look at is, the island with Haiti and the Dominican Republic, what's happened there, and how the difference of how weather and the impacts of erratic weather on both sides of them. So I'd encourage you to look at this YouTube video that shows how Haiti just doesn't have those trees and protection for the onslaught of the hurricanes and different issues that they have with their weather, whereas the Dominican Republic are protected from a lot of trees, so they're more protected. So I'd encourage you to watch that video. It's very interesting, just having trees and not trees. The other thing too is overgrazing. That's a real problem, and agrochemical use as well. I'm just going to talk a little bit about overgrazing, but a little bit later, just that it could be really destructive to root systems. And you see that the animals are not usually happy in those areas anyway. So I'm just going to move along a little bit. Just here's a global
Jen, sorry,
map
I don't want.
showing. Yeah,
You're about.
Go ahead.
You're about at the halfway. Around the halfway mark now.
See, I've always got way too much, and I cut it down before I got on. Okay, so I'm going to go into more practical. Well, just here at the map, actually, it's a good point. I have, this map shows some deserted areas. If you guys are interested, you could see people like Jeff Lawton greening the desert and see what permaculture can do in a desert land. And I just encourage you guys to check it out, those that are interested. We can change our soils, and we can change, how things are grown. So I have a little thing here about tillage and cultivation, but and videos. I will talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Just that in order to regenerate our soil. So this at Bishop's we're really focused on is regenerative agriculture. So talking about how we can rebuild our soils, have more biodiverse systems. And with permaculture, you're actually having plants work with each other so that they feed the soil. You have pest beneficial plants that help each other to avoid different pests. So we're really interested in soil regeneration. So obviously replanting trees is a good way of doing that. And also encouraging not only trees, but plants, animals, fungi, all of that to work together. I have a video here you might want to see. So here's the practical part. So how can we improve our soils and work with our climate change, our changing climate? Well, make sure right away that you know what you're working with. Some of you guys are going to know this already. I usually teach at different levels, so I'm not sure. It sounds like you guys are seasoned gardeners, so take what you can learn and let the rest go. But yeah, really checking your pH levels and your soil textures are important. Also minimally compacting the soil. So that can be using beds versus rows when you're growing. Low or no till is proving to be more and more, there's more and more studies in this happening now, how much we keep in the soil when we don't till. And that's a huge topic, so I won't go too far into that. Add compost. You don't want to add pesticides or herbicides. Add natural amendments. Also, mulch is hugely important. If you have too much sun, it can dry out the soils. Then when you get those torrents of water, then you have erosion. So mulch really helps prevent that. Rotating your crops. You're going to be giving, some are givers and takers in nutrients, some resist pests and disease better. It's just always better to rotate your crops. Also, adding cover crops can really feed your soil, and it can add tilth to your soil, which adds absorption, which increases just the water retention in the soil. Use plants according to the season. So there's warm crops and cool crops. Growing lettuce, a cool season lettuce in the middle of July will have a difficult time in a dry, hot summer. Use proper irrigation. If you have livestock, you can use them to build the soil, not destroy it. And save seeds to develop hardier plants that adapt to our climate. Try and incorporate edible perennial crops. So there's many ways to do no-till. I'm going to be speedily going along because I know myself. So sheet mulching is an example, or they call this the picture here also lasagna gardening. So you can build a garden just by putting covering your grass. You can be doing this in the fall, planting for the spring. We did this for about half of our garden. We have very, very large garden before, not our market garden that we had, but our main one. But we use cardboard. You want to be careful it doesn't have any tape or anything like that on it. And then add compost, manure, and wood chips. So there's ways you can build your soil without having to till. I already talked about chemical fertilizers, not very good. Adding compost is amazing. Eventually, if you really take care of your compost, you're taking care of your soil in your garden, and you can correct a lot of problems just through compost. And there's two types of compost. So you've got your hot compost. You can see the steam coming off of this. They take more work, so you have to rotate it quite often, about every 3 days. And then you've got cold compost that take about 2 to 3 months, but it's pretty good too. We tend to do an in-between. So we go about once a week, sorry, that we do it, but every 3 days is a little bit too much for us. And compost has so many benefits. So you got that natural decaying system that's happening. You're getting really great, interesting microbes that are going into the soil, into the compost. And it's great when you start playing around with fungi too. There's mushrooms like red wine cap mushrooms that are really interesting that you can have with your compost. It reduces weeds. It keeps your pH levels pretty stable and temperature stable, reduces erosion because it really adds that tilth to the soil and holds the water in. So you just need to make sure that you have browns and greens layered together, but you can look at this whole, the slides later. Oops, I went backwards. So I'm always telling everybody, really think about the ingredients. Don't just think about a typical composting ingredients. Like, let's say eggshells, for example. Calcium is considered like the trucker of the nutrients. So it's the one that brings the nutrients to the plant where it needs to go. That's why even, Miracle Grow and all those types of things are realizing that, and they're adding calcium to them, to their mixes. But you can do that naturally just by putting eggshells in your compost, and so think about that, what you're putting in and the different nutrients you could be adding. You can do worm composting. I have a little video here too. And you can also make manure compost or comfrey tea. And I thought I had a video here, but I guess I don't, but it's really not tricky. You can also use this one usually, I don't know how you guys will feel about this, but urine is actually a really good fertilizer. You only need, one part to 10 parts water of urine. You got a really nice fertilizer. So I was getting my family, when we first were doing all this, I was really, really into this. And I was getting I've got 4 kids and my husband, and I was like, okay, everybody's got to collect their pee, let's go. But it's a lot of work. So it's got to be for people that really want to do. We don't do it anymore, is what the point. Anyway, I can't hear you or see you, so it's not. I feel like I'm. It's always weird when I'm talking to the screen.
It's going really well. It's going great.
Okay.
So yeah, you got about another 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
10 minutes.
Good. Thank you. Okay. I love when that's really helpful. So here's an example of rotating. It sounds like you guys are really seasoned gardeners, so you probably already rotate your crops. But just some of these diseases can really last for a long time in the soil. So it's really important to rotate, and it helps the soil. And also when you get into cover crops, I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. It's something to really think about before the crop that you have. That's a whole thing you might want to look into. There's some cover crops that are better than others before certain crops. And definitely mulch your soil. That's just so important. I taught permaculture in Malawi to a community of women, and I was talking to them about mulch, and they said, but we're doing mulch, but they only had a few little pieces of grass on the soil, so it wasn't really covering it. The deeper you go, the better. Like, you're just really protecting that soil and preventing erosion, preventing it from drying it out and really protecting the soil. So once your seedlings are developed, if you have it well mulched, you're already ahead of the game. And there's different mulching materials. We use switchgrass, but you can use straw and hay. Just make sure that be careful with the weed seeds in there. It can have insects and disease, and make sure that it doesn't come from a farm that uses any chemicals or anything like that. But it's really easy to spread. That's what I love about it. It's quick and easy. You can use leaves. The only problem with that is that they really mat down. They're readily available though. What can be interesting in the fall is to rake up your leaves, and before you do your last lawn mowing, lay them over your grass and mow over it, and then collect all the grass and the leaves, and then they're all chopped up, and you've got some greens, you've got some browns, and if you lay it on your garden, you've already got some composting happening already. And grass clippings is great. And pine needles, you just have to be careful about because it can be quite acidic. But with blueberries, plants that are more acidic loving, you want that. Sawdust and wood chips, again, you have to be careful where it's coming from, what type, if it's more acidic or not. Wood chips is great. We enjoy those too, especially around we're doing an orchard area, and they're just really good. Manure is good. It's a great source of organic matter. It can have weeds. Be careful where it's coming from. We got some manure from a friend that they had. We're spreading it on our garden, and there were needles in it from the anyway. So be careful. How they just watch how they take care of their how they care about their animals and stuff. Now some manure can be used almost directly, like the goat manure is pretty good, rabbit manure is pretty good, but animals like cow, horse, and sheep, it's better a little bit later. Chicken manure, make sure it's really, really well composted. You can use newspaper as well for mulch. I have a fellow prof at Bishop's that's going to be doing a whole activity with her students for practicum this summer using different mulches, and she's going to be collecting all the office waste of new paper and shredding it, and that's going to be one of the rows, so I'll be interested to find out how that goes. Plastic is good too. It's not sustainable, obviously, but it can take care of certain issues. And I've got them there if you want to see, because I want to get the rest told to tell you. So how to maximize our changing temperatures. One way is to plant vegetables in season, like I mentioned before, and also grow edible perennials. So this is something that people don't really think about often, is that we have a lot of perennials that can grow in our hardiness zone that grow really well. So we do have the cool season warm crops. We can maximize from, depending on our spring, because we never know, just like we were talking about before, some people, and also fall used to be more, we could calculate more the date, but we can have cool season crops in the spring and the fall, and then warm in the summer. Also, how you irrigate is really important as well. If you're watering overhead, like I have various pictures here, that's good, easy, you got the job done, but there can be fungal problems from that. And also, it's not as the roots are not going to be, they're going to be used to getting the water quickly. So they tend to be up higher on the soil. They don't go down as deep. Whereas if you plant, if you use a a drip irrigation type of system, the plants get their water directly to their roots, and the roots end up and very, very, very slowly, it takes a long, long time, so that the roots end up going way, way down. And that causes a real resilience and strength in the plant, so they can handle the different weather conditions better. And I'm showing here, I love these two. You can even do irrigation systems in pots. And Dubois Ag, I have the website here. They sell all these different systems here in Quebec. They've got all kinds of really neat equipment if you're interested. And then we just use basic old, my husband's really proud of his system because he was really terrified of the whole irrigation system. And then he came up with this one where we just use the, the 50-foot hose that you turn down upside down instead of pouring the air up above. And what's great about these is some plants need more water than others. Like really, potatoes don't need to be watered that much. If you've got it really mulched well, and they've, at first they need to be watered, but after a while they really don't need that much watering. So you can turn them the hose on where you need it. So this really saves the water and directs it only to where you want it to go. But if you have a bigger system, obviously you would want a more complex system, and they have all kinds of irrigation systems that it'll help, it works with your pressure of the water and all of that. Now, regenerative agriculture really talks about the closed loop system in order to be really sustainable. So whatever we get out of our system, we want to be able to put back into the system. So here's a quick picture. How much time do I have left, Julie?
Well, we're coming down to about 3-4 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 minutes.
Yep, that's perfect. So livestock can also improve and build soil. There's silvopasturing, there's mob grazing. So I don't know if any of you have heard of Joel Salatin. This is a system that keeps the animals in really tight spaces, but not like the CAFOs. It's a really healthy system, but they rotate them all the time. So they're having fresh pasture all the time, and then but they're not selecting only the parts of it. So here I've got a picture down here with one cow with all this pasture. You would think, oh, well, that's great, that he's going to have a lot to eat. And then you've got another one cut in 4, and then you've got one in multiple areas. But actually the multiple areas is best for the animal and the plant. And these plants end up being more stable and able to, this is a big topic, so I'm just talking about it briefly about soil in case any of you guys have animals, but you can sequester more carbon as well. So here's a little chart with that if you want to look into that a little bit more. Here's a nice system of silvopasturing, just having the pasture grass, but also being able to have another crop. So here he's got sheep, but he also has apple trees. So they do it in strips usually. So you got a more resilient system. If one fails, he's got, like if apples fail, then he's got his sheep, or the other way around. Nope, I don't know why I got that over again. So I'm going to stop here. I'll check. Oh, nope, not me.
So would you like to stop sharing?
Oh, there we go. I found the right one. So it said pause share.
Would you like to stop?
It says stop video.
Oh, no.
I don't have stop. Oh, good. Great. Thank you.
There you go.
I'm not technically, I'm technically challenged. Let's say that.
I think for a technically challenged person, you did quite well. So everybody, I invite you to turn on your cameras again. Veuillez s'il vous plaît ouvrir vos caméras vidéo si vous voulez. And I'd just like to thank you because that was a quick and very complete overview of the whole system of climate change and what's going on globally, and then some of the issues like soil condition, the mulching, the watering. And I think that people will be able to look through the PowerPoint and take a look at those videos. So there's our little right there. So look over the videos if people want to dive a little more deeply, because I know we have some really experienced gardeners. On a des jardiniers qui ont quand même beaucoup d'expérience here, and some people less as well. So thank you very much. So let's open up and have a discussion then. Comments, questions, things you're struggling with, things you have achieved. I know that I've learned to water my seedlings. If I get the root development, and that happened one year when I had extremely lumpy zucchini, and I looked it up on the internet. Lumpy zucchini, they looked like they had a terrible biblical disease, and I read that it could be caused by bugs. I didn't see any of the bugs. Then I read the finer print, and it was due to a calcium deficiency. And that year it had been extremely dry, so the roots had not gone deep enough. They weren't able to absorb calcium and lumpy zucchinis. And actually, I was recently in the Vegetarian in Sherbrooke buying some zucchini, and I noticed they had lumpy zucchinis. So I think I could say, there you go. That's coming from a region where they've had drought, and we're seeing it on a larger scale. So anybody, I don't know if Andrew's still there. He's got a lot of experience with market gardening. Martin, je ne sais pas si tu as des commentaires. Pat, I don't know, anybody have, we've got some flower gardeners there too who might want to share some of their experience, questions, challenges. Everybody's meditating. I don't see any signs. I did mark down some points I could get started while Deanne, question.
Hello, that was very interesting. There's one farmer that I am listening to. His name is Justin Rhodes, and he does permaculture. And he's been when he brings his cows around to a certain place, he then brings his chickens afterwards, because the chickens scratch everything, and they throw everything all over the place. So by the time they come back again, well, it's all nice and clean, and the cows can go through it again, or sheep, or whatever animal you have that's bigger, and then it's either chickens or fowl. Anyways, it's really interesting. I listen to him as often as I can. I didn't listen to him during January because they were on vacation, but he's starting up again. I noticed. His name is Justin Rhodes, a permaculture. He's really good.
Justin Rhodes?
Rhodes.
Justin Rhodes? Rose.
Rhodes. R-H-O-D-S.
Okay.
It's like the singers.
Okay.
Diane, could you write it in the chat?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be great.
I was just thinking actually that we had, many of us went to visit the Ferme Paysan Gourmand in Saint-Félix-de-Kingsey last summer. I know some of you were there, and they do very much that sort of small scale agriculture where their pigs are grazing and they have the chickens wandering around, and they have an interesting watering systems as well.
So,
Sheila.
So that's a really,
oh, sorry, Jen, do you want to comment?
Just that's does anybody know Joel Salatin? Yeah. So he's written many books on that, if you guys are interested too. If you want me to, I could email it to you, Julie, later. But he's pretty famous in doing the follow leader technique with animals, where they do that. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
We wouldn't be allowed to do what he does in this province. He butchers on his own property, and people come and pick up their chickens and the pigs. And can you imagine trying to do that in this province?
No, it wouldn't work here. Yeah, you're right.
So Sheila, you were the next one with the hand up.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Jen. I was interested in your mulching, you mentioned switchgrass, and I wondered if there's a public source for that where we can buy it, or if it comes in bales.
You have to, we have a neighbor that does it. So we're fortunate we get it from him. Bishop's is now doing switchgrass trials because they're realizing it's really good. There's many, there's a lot of things happening right now that's really interesting. Like even Kernza trials, that's a type of wheat that is a perennial. So they don't have to keep harvesting it. So there's a lot of really neat things, but yeah, switchgrass, unfortunately, I don't know where you can get it bulk, but they're usually kind of small scale people that do that. But I have a neighbor here. If I could, if you email me, I could give you his name.
Okay, thanks very much.
And the key with hay too is to try to get hay that's been cut young. So maybe a second cut hay that hasn't gone to seed, and you'll avoid the weed seed with mulching with hay.
Okay, because we've used straw before, but I don't have the same source.
Yeah. I see Diane has her hand up, but first I just want to ask Teresa, because this was her idea. Thank you, Teresa, to do this a conference on this subject. And I know that you might have to go off to bedtime soon. So I just wondered, Teresa, do you have any questions or any comments or anything you want to bring up?
No, so it's mainly for myself, it was just to learn about the irrigation. Because I know last summer our well often was on the brink of running dry, so my garden was not a priority, according to my husband. So then it was just to see, the different setups that are available. And so thank you for sharing that, because I have some ideas now, and I'll definitely look into the hoses and the drip system.
You're welcome. Yeah, Dubois Agri, I always say it, I can never remember the whole name, so I just call it Dubois Ag. But I have the website on the PowerPoints if you want to check it out, that has a bunch of different irrigation systems. But
definitely.
Say hi to your daughter.
You want to say hi?
Hi.
Future gardener.
Yeah,
exactly. That's great.
One thing that I think one of the classic permaculture projects that I've seen in different places was the hugels, which actually works pretty good. You know what? Does anybody not know what that is? The hugel culture or the hugel mounds?
Could you explain it a bit, Andrew?
Yeah, it's basically you dig a little trench, you pile it full of dead wood, just dead wood like logs and branches and everything, and then you pile a whole bunch of soil on top, and you make like a little mountain, a little hill. And the thing is, the dead wood starts to act like a sponge, and it soaks it up. So I saw that being done in Oregon and in Florida, like in really different climates, and it works pretty well. It's a bit of a project to set up, so it's not necessarily something you do on a big scale. But if you have like some parts of your garden where you know that you don't going to water very often, or you want to try it out, it's actually kind of a fun project, because you get all that dead wood, you got to pile soil on it, and then over the next few years it just gets better and better.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a perfect example, yeah, of building soil. And yeah, we did that actually for part of our pasture, because there's a big hole, and we didn't have the time to, like, it's something that's really great if you don't have time and money, to fill a big area. We had a lot of trees and some dead trees, but yeah. So is it Andrew or Drew? Did I call you Drew? But anyway, that was a good.
Yeah,
I could put a picture of, pardon, Andrew? I could put a picture of the hugel culture on my slide too. And I also have other ones that I forgot, like perennial edible perennial plants, like Good King Henry and everything. I think I had my compost twice, but I have some slides that I didn't get to show you that you'll see.
Yeah, I'd be really interested in hearing about, I know Deanne's waiting patiently, but I'd just be really interested in hearing about some of those perennial crops. There's asparagus. There's a lot of fruit bushes and various berries, but I think that I saw perennial spinach, which I'm trying out. But is there anywhere we could look for a list of that, or do you have suggestions off the top of your head?
Yeah, it depends. I've got tons, like, because I use it throughout my permaculture. So sorry, Diane, I'll just say one thing. Just that, let's say I'm talking about water, then I talk about water plants and all the perennials with that. Or let's say I'm talking about woodland forest gardening aspect, and I talk about that, or dye plants and things like that. So it depends on what you wanted. I can show you a database. I can give you a database where I give my students that you can find what you want. So in permaculture, for example, we do a lot of edible plants. So you would just have to click on there, navigate through it. That actually I have to do that tomorrow morning with my students, is navigate through it, but it's not difficult. You guys have been doing gardening. You've probably looked at other databases, but just, there's a spot where you can add edible perennials there, and your plant hardiness. And if you get more into permaculture, we talk about nitrogen fixers and nutrient accumulators and pollinators, etc. You can pick for that too. So it's really cool. I love that database. I think everybody in.
Sorry, that's an excellent resource. If you can send that along, I will send it to everybody by email, and it'll be on our Facebook gardeners group. You can access that.
Yep.
Diane, the patient woman. It is good name.
That's funny. I was wondering about biochar. I don't know if that's the way it's said. I've heard some good things about it, but I'm still uncertain about it. Do you have any inkling about it?
Thoughts? I'm not knowledgeable about it, other than I know that it is part of what we talk about with regenerative agriculture, and it is supposed to help the soil, and but I don't know enough details, but I don't know the studies. Like, I haven't looked into the studies of what actually, does it work or does it not. So yeah, I don't know much.
I'm wondering, Andrew, do you have any comments on that use of charcoal or biochar?
Yeah, I've used it. I have some, and I've studied it, and I've worked with it a bit. I know some people were really into it. So Diane, if you want to talk about it sometime, feel free. It's kind of a big subject. It's not really on topic in a way.
Well, I heard that it's made easily in a barrel, like 2 iron barrels, and then you heat up the wood underneath that, and when it heats up, it just burns inside, and that's how it's made.
Do you say you made that? Have you made it?
No, I've seen some make it, but I've seen them put a big barrel in another barrel with the wood in it, and there's wood underneath it, and that's how they get it all done. But
there's a lot of systems. There's a lot of systems for doing that, and again, it's a big topic.